All right, so this is actually a good chance to talk about topology and line flow and edge flow. So far, we've only been working from kind of a simple cube, and that has become this nice little torso with all these great flowing edges and loops. And what I mean by that is when I go to this loop selection on the faces, you can actually see as I'm scrolling up to select these edges or these loops, it makes this nice clean line of loops. And this is where discussions about topology and edge flow and loops and stuff come into play, and why it's so important as you're modeling to keep this kind of stuff in mind. Because basically, once we get to the rigging process and the texturing process, as clean as you can make these with as few triangles or n-gons as possible will make it much easier to animate without any problems. In fact, I don't even think you can texture something with n-gons. I may be wrong about that, but an n-gon is something with more than 4 edges. 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all quads, which is 4-sided polygons. And you might hear people say it's a no-no to have triangles as well, because that's really bad. I've heard it said that you can actually have quads and triangles in models for Cinema 4D to animate. And in fact, things like Octane break your quads up into triangles anyway. So it's kind of one of those things where if you accidentally have a triangle somewhere, that's okay. Here and there, it's okay to have a triangle. But what we're going to do is try to do our best to stick to having just quads wherever possible, which means we need to talk about edge flow. So let me open up another project where I have this kind of set up. Edge flow and topology. So what this exercise is about is showing you how when you start to change direction with a model, so for instance, when the neck becomes the head, and the head becomes the ears, and things start to change direction. In this case, it's a shoulder becoming an arm. What will happen is those quads will start to have to shift and rearrange themselves in order to create these new quads somewhere else. So when you have edges that meet up with each other like this, I basically bridged these capsule and this cube together. Here we go. Whoa. So I basically bridged this capsule and this cube together and put a symmetry object on it to show that when you have a body that then shifts direction, the edges have to sort of flow into that new shape, and sometimes that shape has less polygons or less edges than the shape that you were working with, and so you have to figure out a way to keep it having only 4-sided polygons that create this new edge somewhere else. And so what happens when you shift direction, that's what topology is. And you can really find a whole lot of great resources online. Pinterest has a lot of great resources where you can just see edge flow techniques and how to make sure you have good topology on your arms. You can find references that have awesome imagery that you can just reference over and over again, and even just drawing over a live figure model to see where you would put lines to kind of create these new edge flows to how you would 3D model an actual live figure. So most of the time when you have really nice topology, you'll see that these 4-sided polygons meet at the corners like this. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 quads right here. There's another 1, 2, 3, 4 quads, and all the way up and around this. So if I do an edge loop selection like this, you can see those nice lines forming. But then when they change direction, it's not a square anymore. It sort of becomes a star, and I'll show you what I mean here. So right here, where this shifts direction, this group of 4 polygons actually becomes, here's 4 right here, but right here, it's actually 5 polygons that meet at a corner. And that's because this changed direction. So the same thing happened when this top became rounded. So we changed directions right here to become, the top. So instead of being just a big long square, it turns directions right here. And that instead of being a 5 polygon square is more like a 3 polygon square. 1, 2, 3. It's not a star, I guess. It's more like a group of 3. So whenever we are going to be actually modeling these things together, creating arms, creating fingers, limbs, changing direction, we're going to be trying to keep this in mind and how to keep us at quads only. However, I'm not a super expert at this. It's just one of those things that after a while doing it, I'm getting a little bit better at it, and hopefully we'll all sort of do the best we can with this good topology, just keeping that in mind that we want to keep this to 4 sides as much as possible. It's almost like a puzzle, like in a lot of ways. When you're like, oh no, how do I make this continue on and still only keep it in quads? I can't have this triangle here. How do I make this triangle into a 4-sided polygon? Okay, well now that I've added that point to it, how do I make that other shape not an n-gon? So there's little puzzles that we sort of have to work on to make sure that we're only using 4-sided polygons wherever possible. But it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's get started with the arms on that character. All right. So to make this a nice, even cylinder, I am going to actually use an actual cylinder to make this arm. So, and in fact, not a cylinder. Let's use a capsule. The reason I like capsules versus cylinders for stuff like this is because these caps are actually connected. And with cylinders, the caps are not connected, and it's just silliness. I know we're not actually going to be using the caps, but it's still one of those things that I tend to prefer a capsule over a cylinder wherever possible. So let's just reduce it down. Let's make it a lot smaller. We're going to make the radius much thinner as well. Once we're in object mode, okay, there we go. If we make it in object mode, you can just grab this little square here to make this cylinder nice and tight. I'm going to rotate it from this view. Okay, we'll put it about right here for now. Actually, no, let's make it longer. This is good for now, because then we can just kind of model the rest the way that we want it. Also, I'm going to make these cap segments very low, because we're going to delete these caps. Height segments, let's give it 3 height segments for now. And then the rotation segments, this is what's really important. We're working with low polygon geometry. The reason we do that is because the lower the polygon count, the easier it will be to texture, to rig, to animate, all of that. It actually makes it much easier, and especially down the road. So say I was making a character for a Snapchat filter that you want to put on your carpet or something. You want to have a little Joey Judkins dancing around in your living room or dabbing or something. The lower the polygon count, the better for those types of programs, because a lot of times there is an actual limit to the polygons that you can use. Or if you're working on video games, just a general rule of thumb is the lower the polygons, the better, so that the processing power is lower once you get to the texturing, rendering, real-time phase. So if we're ever doing real-time animation especially, you would want to have the lowest polygon count you can. We'll talk about how to smooth out these polygons in a second, but for now let's just keep working on this arm. So now I've got, okay, so here this rotation segment is way too high, so I'm going to make it 8. The reason I want to make it 8 is because it's pretty much the lowest polygon you can get while still retaining a round shape. If I were to make it 6, I think I would have a little of like 1 too few. That's okay, but it's not really quite what I want. I'm going to make it 8. I'm going to make it editable by hitting C. And I'm going to go ahead and delete these vertices at the ends. And so now what we got to do is figure out how to connect this arm to this body. So first what we want to do is we'll bring this out of our symmetry object, and we're going to actually connect these together using our mesh conversion connect objects command. I'm going to go ahead and keep these in their own little group called original. Not original grow, but original geo. Change this capsule to woman body. And so now what we're going to learn is a few new tools. You know what, I'm going to back up a few steps here and we'll just fast forward through this part, but I need to move this whole cylinder over a little bit. It looks like it was a little further back than I wanted it to be. I guess we're going to do it right about here. And I'll move this up a little bit. Okay, so now we need to figure out how to attach this to the body. So I'm going to group these together by going to Commands, Connect Objects. Put that back in the symmetry object. So this is something I might need to relearn here. Oh, I'm going to turn this one off. Something I need to relearn here is how to open this up and connect it right here. But first, I'm going to kind of straighten this out so that it's lined up a little bit better. So if I do a loop selection and make sure it says select boundary loop, I can rotate this. I'll scale it as well, just so it's not losing any volume as it turns like that. That way it's just kind of nice and lined up with where we want it to be. Maybe not quite that drastic. Okay. So what I'm going to do here is called a bevel. Yes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is called a bevel. Do I want to do that? Hang on. If I do that, then it adds okay. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to add some more edge loops to this body so that we can connect this 8-sided shape to this by making sure we have 8 edges that we can bridge to. So the first thing I want to do is add a loop here and here. We'll add one here and we'll add one here. And then what I can do is I can actually just delete this vertex where it could, or let's make it actually, yeah, that vertex is fine. What we can do is smooth this out once we have this connected. But what I'm going to do is delete this vertex, and it'll delete all these faces, leaving this opening here. And this is where we can actually connect this geometry to each other. And we can always clean this up. That's the whole idea with modeling, is that we just start large and then we start to get more detailed as we go. So this is called the bridge tool, the MB. And what it's going to do is going to allow us to making sure we're on edge mode here. Excuse me. It'll make connections between 2 pieces of geometry. So let's make sure we're not selected on anything. And we'll just drag from this edge to this edge. It creates a new flat piece of geometry right there. And it connects, it also makes sure that it welds these vertices together. This is nowhere near, as smooth as we're going to want it to be, but at least it's connected. We can always smooth that out later because this is what modeling is. We just have to start with, I missed it. We have to start with the large shapes first and start to move stuff around as we get a little bit more into it. In fact, what I want to do is I want to make one more edge loop right in the center here. And now let's go to our brush tool and let's start to smooth this out. Well, let's just see what it does. I'm making one more edge loop right there just so that it has like a shoulder to work with. So MC to bring up your brush tool. At 35%, what does it do? It gets a little funky, but at least it's kind of smoothing out our topology. And that's kind of what we wanted here for now. Because then what we can do is we can start to bring the smear back in. And bring that shoulder up. The point is that we knew that this was the right amount of edges and loops to work with. And that's why I did it that way. And see how I can kind of like adjust this and make it a lot nicer looking? This is still a little funky in the back, so I think I might want to smooth this out just a little bit. Actually, now that this is sort of moved over, I might want to move this in. Just like that, we have a nice long cylindrical arm connected to our torso. I'm going to go ahead and smooth this out again using the smooth tool on our brush. Let's bring this down a bit, 15%. Actually, I think it's pushing this in a little bit too much, so I'm going to do a little bit of true modeling here. I want this to sort of taper out towards the body. As you start to kind of orbit around, you can see where it's starting to like, okay, it's crunching in right here, and I don't really want that. I want this to sort of go outward toward the body. This one is a culprit as well. There we go. If this part of the process, pushing and pulling vertices, is kind of like, I don't know if I like doing it. I don't know what to tell you, because that's really, this is actually modeling. What we're doing right now, where we're pushing and pulling vertices, the sculpting tool is really helpful, but in a lot of cases, it only gets you so far. In this case, what I'm doing is I'm really making sure that these lines, so like this line in particular, one all the way up to here, I either want it to go nice and smoothly up to this direction, or I want it to smoothly sort of turn and go this direction. Maybe let's try to do both. We'll pull these up as well. See what I'm doing? I'm watching how my edges are flowing into each other. If I orbit this way, how does it look? This one's kind of pulled up a little bit, right? So let's smooth these out. Okay, so now if I turn, you can see it's still a little bit funky going up this direction. I'm just kind of looking. See how this line flows up into this one? That's what I want. All right, so take a look. If you back up, you can actually see we have the semblance of a character starting to form here. So the few things I want to do before we jump into the hand, I want to add a few more edge loops through this arm. And this is important because when you're deforming geometry, and I'll probably have another exercise for this, Michael, just to show when you just like kind of what what's her name did, Brienne did, where you turn the geometry and there's not enough loops.
Yeah.
For now though, we'll just add a few loops here in the arm and make sure there's enough at the elbow and the shoulder. I like that you can now hold shift to perfectly cut edges right down the line. You know, keeping them fairly similarly sized. Yeah, I think this is going to be good. So one thing I want to mention real quick is that, yes, we've been working in low poly, and you can definitely see that it's starting to smooth out now, but when you put the symmetry object inside of a subdivision surface, if you hold Option again, you can just keep it in there, it really smooths everything out now. And actually now I can see that this is really pulling in quite a bit, so I might want to grab that out and pull some of these vertices out again. Quick tip, learned this from Handle Eugene. If you click the Q key on your keyboard, it will turn on and off your subdivision surface. So it's a quick way to just turn that on or off just to see how it's smoothing. Oops. There we go. Yeah, right here it's kind of pulling in a little bit too soon. So I want to kind of move this out. It's starting to do weird things here, so and there's that star. There's our five-sided 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 polygons that meet right there where it turns. Okay. I think this will work for now. Cool. All right, so now we can move on to the hand.